Alright, your engine maintenance manual number 252C, model 567C, engine 3rd edition, January 1975. We're on fuel systems. Alright, section 10. I meant section 10. Alright, section 10 is the fuel system general description. Most important part of the fuel system unit injector. This high level of pressure fuel metering pump spray valve combined in one housing. The injectors, one per cylinder, of the supply with a continuous flow of fuel pressure delivered to the separate pump fuel supply tank strainers, filters, and fuel manifolds. Apply and return fuel lines, complete with a system description. Injector cross-section unit. Injector's name. Various parts of figure 10. 1. Located with the sheet with the taper to the center of the cylinder head with the spray tip protruding slightly between the bottom of the head. Is positioned with the head by a dowel and held in place by injector holder, down crab, and nut. External water working parts of the injector lubricated by the oil from the end of the injector rocker and arms adjusting screw of the inner working parts lubricated cooled from the by flow of the fuel oil through the injector. The main working parts of the injector rack are general plunger, following spring, and cylindrical check valve of the plunger given a constant stroke, reciprocating motion by the injector cam acting as the rocker arm of the following timing of the injection during the plunger stroke with adjusting screw with the end of the rocker arm. Figure 10 2 show the flow of the fuel with the injector during the downward stroke rotation of the plunger, meaning of the rack with the general control of the quantity of the fuel injected with the cylinder during each stroke with the rack position is controlled by the governor through an injector lay shaft linkage. The gear is keyed with a sliding fit with the plunger allowed with the plunger vertical motor injector rack setting adjustment is given in section 12 of the manual. The helicals near the bottom of the plunger control with the opening and closing of the both fuel parts of the proper plunger bushing. The rotation of the plunger regulates the time of the bolt of the parts closed during the downward stroke with each control of the quantity of the fuel injected with the cylinder with the figure 10-3 as if the plunger rotated with the idle position fuel loaded position pumping part with the stroke length and injection is started earlier more fuel is injected. Proper atomization is fuel with the maintained with a high pressure created with the downward stroke with the head of the plunger with force with the fuel passes the cylindrical valve with the out of the 6 spray holes and the tip of the injector with the cylindrical valve prevents the fuel leakage on the tip of the flat check valve with the under the lowest pressure excludes combustion gases from the injector. Injector has filters at the fuel inlet and outlet connections to protect the working parts of the design of fuel injectors even the 567 engines high output injector, standard injector, and the application for the injectors given in table B in section 11 according to the engine house horsepower full load injector rack length. Should fuel construction control plunger rotation. Alright, the injector is similar with the 421 thousandth of the 10-inch diameter plunger with the injector plunger helical with the train with a greater effective with the fuel injection stroke with external high output with the injector with the identified addition with the part number with the vertical groove with the body with the opposite of the injector rack location with the dowels installed with the injector cylinder head. Different positions with the install. Locating dowel injector is on the bottom center line with the lineup with the corresponding hole for the cylinder head by the locating dowel with the injector with the position further out with the left of the cylinder line with the corresponding with the locating of the whole cylinder head with the internal plunger bushing a large upper dowel with preventing insulation in the injector body. Its plunger can be identified with the number 7 stamped on it. Filters. Only fuel filter mounted with the engine sintered bronze filter shown in figure 10-4. However, the oil filters are not part of the engine as you with the fuel system with a varied design depending on the engine installation. See for the publication index for the maintenance instruction particular filter. You the engine mounted fuel filter located on the right front of the engine side. Glasses are provided with the top of the filter housing to allow the visual indication of the condition of the fuel system. Fuel returning injectors pass with the return fuel with the glasses near the engine. The return with the fuel tank with the end of the normal operation gas fill is full of fuel with the orifice inlet with the return side glass causes the fuel back pressure in the injectors over the about 5 pounds per square inch. To improve operation addition with the orifice is used with the return side glass with the stand-up pipe by the filter used on the 8 and 12 cylinder engines. And it shows the return sight glass from 45 pound sight and 4.5 pound sight glass, 2 engine and sight gouge, orifice fuel tank, manifold, filter, assembly filter, element, sight gauge, bypass valve, fuel and drain, fuel tank. And then your standard bronze fuel, return sight glass, 5 pound standpipe, bypass sight glass, fuel inlet gauge, relief valve, gasket case, elements, and drain. All right, under normal operating, by bypass of the side glass from the engine, but it should be empty of fuel with the elements of the filter by become dirty with the fuel with the pressure of the filter will increase the fuel pressure element housing. Um, Exceeds 45 psi of the relief of the valve of in the filter will be open. Fuel will enter the filler by bypassing sight glass, returning the fuel tank, starving the engine fuel with of fuel. Small trickle of the fuel properly allowed with the leak around with the relief valve that may be noticed entering the glass. However, this is normal. It does not indicate the clogged elements. Air gas and fuel system will appear with the return side glass with the bubble to enter for the fuel with any place with the suction line with a cowl to the engine to misfire with the bubble to the return side glass with the fuel pump with the returning of the engine stop with the indicator the air entering with the suction side of the fuel pump. If the bubbles appear with the engine running, it is indicated with the leak valve with the fuel injector is aligned with the combustion gas. If it get into the fuel, little or no fuel with the return side glass, while the bypass side glass empties indicate with the insufficient fuel supply in the engine. See operation fuel from the fuel tank system supply withdrawn by the fuel pump through the suction and strain with the discharge fuel over the discharge filter over the pass through the elements of the fuel manifold supply line from where the flow for the jumper line at each cylinder from the injector through the injector inlet filter. Small portion of the supply fuel is the injector. To each injector is pumped to the cylinder with very high pressure through the cylindrical check valve with the spray with the tip of the cylinder. Tip of the injector quantity of the fuel depends on the rotative position of the plunger set by the bracket and the governor. The exhaust fuel must not be used with the injector flow through the injector, serving to lubricate the cooling of the water cooling the working parts. Cooling the working parts. Okay, the fuel then leaves the injection for the return fuel filter. The filter is to protect the injector of the vent with the backward flow of the fuel into the injection return fuel line with the return fuel filter injector hex of the fuel return with the fuel return manifold with the orifice inlet with the return sight glass. Orifice restrict for the return fuel with the extent of the maintained back pressure approximately 5 pounds with the fuel continues into the return sight glass filling with the glass down through the standpipe at the end of the glass from the return line into the supply tank D and maintenance and one injector for the installation with the when installing the injectors, the engine make sure for the correct one with a specific application per identification per given under the description in the section. Installation is valve. See the injector body taped hold with the cylinder head is clean. Install with the injector. Apply with the injector with hold down with the crab and cylindrical washer nut with the torque nut 40 to 50 pounds. Connect the injector rack with adjusting the micro leakage. Install with the Titan fuel supply return line with the injector engine fuel manifold. Install with the rocker arm shaft and rocker arms. Loosen the injector rocker arm nuts back off the adjusting screw with it before tightening the rocker arm shaft nuts. Injector is now ready for timing. With the timing, when the injector is installed with the main racking, making time as valve with this flywheel with the 4 degrees before top dead center with the being timed. Insert the gauge into the hole provided from its injector body. Turn the rocker arm adjusting screw into the shoulder with the gauge just passes over the injector follower guide. Alright, note the injector rocker arms must be released, rotating the crankshaft at least 1 revolution after resetting the overspeed trip on the event with a trip before timing the injector timing, adjusting the screw with the locking nut, holding the adjusting screw with the position with the screwdriver, the recheck with the setting of the injector sticking. The engine encounter injector striking difficulties due to the fuel with the lube oil with the filter maintenance conditions. These conditions very often monetary with the injector removal may be minimized. Utilizing alcohol and free with the use of the injector place with the ordinary commercial with the menthol can be applied to the injector with the hold the opposite through the hole opposite with the timing of the timing tool hole, popping the injector motoring engine with a shake condition that usually occur within the injector's held with the plungers down with the engine stop with the shoulder injection rack shows the signs of sticking. They should be checked out from the gum or the varnish deposit present with the rack with a big clean with the alcohol rechecked. If the remedies sticking in the persist, the injector should be removed and replaced with the injector proper working order. If no cases, should injectors be crouched out or cut out with the engine operated. If the injector is operating unsatisfactory, cannot be remedied or replaced. The engine should be shut down with corrective measures to overcome the trouble that has been carried out. Alright, your surface injector with the clean condition but it must be maintained tough with the dirt with any form of the most common cause of the injector failure when any with the injector is in the engine protected against. dirt, dust, and other foreign material of the various filters of filters employed injector stored with the protective against the harmful material by the filter with which the seals over the body opening with the stirring with the protective of the slipping of the black cloud with the entire different set of the conditions encountered when it becomes necessary to disassemble an injector for repair with the overhaul with the condition necessary with the provision of the special shops equipment and trained personnel with these items are expensive for the most case of the customer would be not warranted expense electric motive maintenance of this service for the other customer recommended the injector be returned by the nearest factory with the branch built on unit exchange for particular services either the factory rebuild bulletin number 302. 2. Use of the injector test stand. In order to use the just satisfactory engine performance injector should be tested whenever the removal of the engine, regardless of the reason for this removal is in. It would be well up to set up the program testing with all the injectors of the engine during the annual inspection in order to ensure qualification injection for the completing engine set. Recommend that the injector is tested with the same oil and for rust prevention given under the storing injectors. Alright, it is important individual doing the test under this basic with the principle for the injector of the testing procedure in order to prevent the qualification defect of injectors condemning the good ones of the instructor you for the injector test and with the outline each for the separate tests of procedures along with the basic explanation operating flow of the construction instruction covering the testing 5, 6, 7 injectors through the use of the test standard part 8202941 figure 10.6 revised test stand 8171779 are not applicable to other type of test equipment since the injector left without leak off rate is very greatly proportional volume of the fuel contained with a high pressure portion of the test stand. Test of the injector stand with the basic stand consists of the fuel reservoir with a filter with a high pressure pump with the pressure gauge with the necessary with the connection with the line fitting with the supply fuel with the injector under the HES. Placing of the test stand operation should be set with the instruction with the manufacturer inspected with carefully with the dirt and foreign material with the tank lines filled tank with the fuel operated with a pump purge all free from the system. Show that the injector test stand pump levered injector popping levered. C the pressure shutoff level and D the clamp wrench. The investigation of the has been shown with the cost of the fuel oil is U with the test stand that has marked off the test retained oil regardless of fuel oil line may be U with the provide the cost of not less than 30-32 SSUs at 100 degrees Fahrenheit. Do not reuse fuel oil pumped through injectors into the plastic bowl. Test stand for leaks. Install the test block with a place for the injection for the test on the stand pump with the pressure for the 2,000 pounds. Indicate the stand gave with the pressure should not drop below with the 1,975 pounds in 5 minutes. Release the block with a recheck with the 500 to 100,000 psi of the pressure should be over 1 minute no more. Apparent gauge drop. The test was made with the pressure shut off with the valve with the open all the way with the test and satisfactory injectors test must be made using the shut off valve of the preceding. If preceding tests indicated the leakage, just stand and repeat the test over the closing of the shutoff valve before timing of the leak operation with the test with the satisfactory shutoff of the valve closed with the necessary shutoff valve and making the injector hold pressure. Replace with the new stand with the operation after remove the replace with the gauge and the fuel tank with the filter and the pump. Then any read of the test block should be installed with the outline and pressure with the 2,500 psi with any of the leaks 6 times before testing with the stand for leaks. Operating the injector test stand if in use to test stand, but the operator must conserve the instrument rather than tool. Either effort should be made to make a manual operation. Of repeated tests, the repeated tests the same. The following general procedure for the list with the help of the team with a uniform operation. 1. When operating the pump, use the rate of 60 strokes per minute, but they give it enough fuel rate that operates the check volt value smoothly with a circulate with the fuel injector. When you use the pumping lever, do not use the surface with the damage either the injector over the lever. Do not permit the lever to fit freely. And making holding tests do not pump with the stand valve with a 25 psi. The test the stand regularly should be checked daily for the leaks using the test block. Fuel oil used for the test should be not reused. Injector testing. Rack freeness test. Explanation. The rack engages a small pinion with the injector plunger with the strip to rotate the plunger with respect with the 2 ports injector bushing thus regulating the amount of fuel injected with the per stroke with the plunger. Binding of the rack is generally caused by the damaged gear with the scored plunger with the bushing with the galling of the rack itself with the engine with the binding of the rack must cause sluggish and erratic speed change overspeed trip action. 2. The test consider the satisfactory of the rack falling out of the full of the travel out by its own weight when the injector's head is held horizontally and rotated to its axis. Alright, the binding plunger test with the explanation failure with the injector pump. Plunger move up and down freely, indicate with the screw with the plunger bushing with the wear of the broken with the spring with the engine with the plining of the plunger with the wheel cover with the erratic cylinder firing with the extreme cover with the overspray tripping action. Test place injector test chamber that do not attach the fuel line with the rack with the fuel position and pump with all the fuel out with the injector pump the lever figure 10-6 with the item B with all the fuel is off with the drive press with the injector plunger extend with the fuel travel with the relief of the pump lever or the plunger should return with the top of the stroke when the finite snap action. Repeat the test with the rack and then have fuel with no fuel position. Care should be taken to be used when tests prevent the plunger from snapping back so violently the plunger stops becomes broken. Spray tip orifice test explanation: 6 small hole with the injector spray tip with the serve of the control injector pressure for the penetration fuel atomization plunging with the one or more of the holes may be chained with the injection with the characteristics enough that cause the smoke exhaust in the extreme case if the pressure builds up the injector body might lead to broken spray tips and injector rocker arms. Test: attach the test and stand fuel line with the injector. Be careful to bleed all of the air fuel system. The best accomplished by holding the fuel line with the left hand injector fill cap and the oil inlet hole. Slowly pumping the test sand, the pump lever figure 10-6 of the item A until the clear fuel from the outlet side with the injector clamp bar with the injector start the tighten the clamp wrench fit item D with the operator of the test pump with the lever the rate 6 full strokes per minute. Observe the spray injector tip the fuel should be dished over each of the orifice. The distribution angle of the spray should be uniform. Caution: do not put hands near the spray tip. The high pressure fuel is capable of penetrating the skin and entering into the bloodstream causing severe injury. Alright, value opening pressure test. The explanation: cylindrical check valve of the injector tip serve only with the prevent the flow of the fuel of the cylinder for the time of the injection does not take with the waste. Do not control the injection characteristics. A new injector of the valve will open with the pressure for the 1400 psi per square inch. The nature of the valve spring, however, is in such takes a slight light set with the first cell over 100 hours of operation, causing open open pressure drop to 150 psi below the reading taken anew prior to the use of the engine. Any of the additional drop of the pressure result with the normal wear of the working parts of the valve. Alright, when the valve opens, the pressure drop below the 600 psi with the valve action will likely become erratic due to the cocking of the valve stem with the lacking with the spring pressure with the excessive with the wear of the valve is prone to leak with the can result with the smoke exhaust possible scored liner in position piston. Test may be the injector of the install with the test stand with the outline with the preceding test. Place the injector rack at the full fuel position. Operate the pump lever at least 24 strokes to ensure the observed leakage if it does not do with the cocked valve. Give the pump lever an additional full stroke with immediately no pressure. The test gauge cells on the valve is closing pressure, but since very little differential between the valve opening and the valve closing pressure for the two can consider with identical to the purpose of this test. Pressure is less than 600 psi. Injector should be rejected. Alright, body pressure test explanation. No external fuel leakage fill inlet body seal with applied plunger fuel cap gaskets is permitted. Such leakage will cause fuel dilution of the engine lube oil whether not caught on time and could result in serious engine damage. Test the injector installed with the test and outline preceding test. If it does not proper popping lever at the same time and slowly operate the test stand. Pumping the lever the injector plunger has been breath at the point of the plunger ports of the plunge bushing with the cover of the pressure for the inject your body will rise above the valve opening with the pressure for the holding the popping lever the position operating the pump of the lever with the body pressure for the up to 2000 psi. Injector should be rejected with the leakage of the observed the body with the body plugs of filter cap gaskets. The leakage of the rack should be disregarded for the purpose of the test of the covered in the following section. During the test, observe the top of the filter cap at any sign of the leakage between the ball seat with the fuel supply line filler caps. If such leakage is selected below the fuel line and the accumulation of the compressed air with the reheat the test. If the leakage is evident, loosen the fuel line with the injector, retighten the test again with the change of the filter on the cap of rejecting the injector. Holding pressure test explanation. All injectors lose pressure due to the leakage of the one and several points of leakage must be controlled with a satisfactory degree of the injector manufacturer in order to prevent the excessive engine and lube oil dilution and at the same time achieve the dependable injector operation. Holding pressure tests will qualify injectors have specified leak off the rates provided the leakage of the proper point with satisfactory controlled outline body. No leakage is permitted over the body seal filter gasket body plugs outline and body pressure test. If the leakage of the injector tip no consequence will provide of the injector following with a hold or pressure if the leakage of the tip of the reservoir of the injector should be popped. The hold held several times and ensure the leakage is not due to the cock valve. Leakage occurs other than the indicated in A and B with above the fuel show of the fuel injector bracket with the will do with leakage of the past ground joint between the injector body with the injector bushing, leakage of the top plunger and the bushing lap fitted. The leakage of the injector bracket control of the time or interval required with the pressure of the injector body leaks off the 1000 psi of the valve with the opening pressure for the less than 1000 psi to 400 psi with the fast leak off the rate usually indicated with excessive wear become between the plunger and the bushing, sensitive to the ground joint between the injector body and the bushing. Seldom leaks unless disturbed. The amount of fuel leak of noted with the rack during the test of the indicated with the amount with which the leak of the oil injector operating with the engine normal pressure to 2040 psi. The test. The injector installed with the test stand with the proceeding the test injector smartly with the test stand pump level lever 15 to 20 strokes with a suitable stopwatch from the time interval required with the pressure drop of the 1000 psi value opening pressure which is lower to 400 psi of the interval less than 35 seconds. Repeat the test and close the pressure shut off valve figure 10.6 item C. Immediately after popping the injector, intervals show still less than 35 seconds. The injector should be rejected. Any injector failing of the past one test outline should be returned to one of the electric motive for factory branch of the remanufacturing. Or replacing the injector filters. The injector should not be disturbed and removed expected during injection. Injector reconditioning when all parts are completely washed in the event of fuel stoppage of the injector. Storing injectors are not to be used with a considerable length of time should be protected against rusting. Rust by using oil that's stable and non-corrosive straight with a run petroleum stillated the kerosene valve. The range is off. The recommended with the injectors be tested for the use of this oil with the system of the treatment that will take in the care of the time in the injector tap. The after treatment injector will be stored with a protected container until needed. Drawing file 207, given the detail of the construction injector storage box must be retained on this. Required the box is accommodated with the injector holding rack and cylinder shown in figure 10.7. The diesel fuel recommendations, failure information on fuel oil specification maintenance 1750 for railroad engine 567 engines or 1751 industrial 567 industrial series engines. Fuel system components vary type of the design. Fuel system components are used with a different engine installation more adequately covered with a separate maintenance instruction. These instructions are listed in service publications. And then go through an equipment list and it shows you your engine. Section 11, Governor Engine Speed Control.